What's up, everybody? Welcome to the podcast. This is the Husband Coach Show, and I'm your host, Jason Schnitzer. Welcome to your next episode. All right, what I've got for you today is why self-regulation is so important for being a husband, a father, and just the best man you can be in your life. And we're going to talk a little bit about regulation strategies. What is self-regulation? And how you can apply this to your everyday life. So let's start off by talking about what exactly is self-regulation. If you've listened to any of my other episodes, you know a little bit about the nervous system, especially if you've listened to episode number 3, which is Foundations of Self-Control. And essentially, self-regulation is your ability to notice and navigate the highs and lows of nervous system activation and then eventually return to calm. Okay, what does this mean kind of in layman terms? Basically, when you get activated, triggered, when you feel body sensations, when you get upset, when you get sad, when you get frustrated, when you get anxious, when you experience any of the range of emotions that your body is capable of feeling, you are able to notice them happening, because what happens is you um, you experience those emotions and get triggered, or you have a reflex into those emotions a lot of times outside of your conscious awareness. So just like you get hungry and then next thing you know, you're kind of irritable and you're like, oh man, I feel like frustrated or angry. And then next thing you know, you're like, your stomach starts to hurt, and it's like, oh, I'm not angry, I'm hangry, right? The digesting your food. There are a lot of processes that are going on outside of your conscious awareness. In other words, you don't have to think about doing those things, they just happen. Same thing happens with your reactions to emotions. So, the ability to self regulate when you notice that sensation happening within you and you have the experiences of frustration, anger, sadness, fear, excitement, joy, love, all the things, is it starts with your ability to notice those things. If you have the experience of, you know, let's say talking about, your wife talks to you about taking out the trash, right? Or doing the dishes, or your kids are just a little bit overwhelming that day. A lot of times it can feel like super frustrating, and it seems like maybe you go from 0 to 100 and you don't even know why. Well, part of self-regulation is starting to recognize the antecedents to you getting to a point where you're upset or you're yelling or you are dealing with these emotions that are going on with you in a way for when you look back, it's like, man, why did I act like that? That's outside of my character, or, this is not how I want to be showing up in my marriage. This is not how I want to be showing up for my kids, with my kids. It's not the example I want to be setting. And a lot of times we'll look back on these situations and think to ourselves, like, man, what? I don't understand why I acted that way, or why I responded in that manner. And if you've ever noticed yourself get upset, and then all of a sudden, 30 minutes go by, 20 minutes go by, and you look back and you're like, man, it's like, again, what came over me? Well, what's happened in the time where you had your reaction to the time where you kind of had this self-realization is your body naturally has regulated itself back to a state of calm. Now, whether that be because you were able to express yourself, and again, usually it's in a way that you're not so happy about. Like, for example, when you're really upset at something and you yell at somebody, right? What happens afterwards? Usually a few things. One, that feeling of that pent up, angst or anger gets released, right? So there is that release of that emotion. But on the other hand, a lot of times we're left with the feelings of shame and guilt because the way that we expressed ourselves and the way that we navigated that emotion was not aligned with the type of person or the type of man that we want to become or be or show up as in our marriage and for our kids. So when we are able to actually sit with that and start to experience the things that are going on within our bodies, what begins to happen is you start to notice, and again, the antecedents, that's a fancy term for what happens before an event, right? So in this case, it would be like the outburst of anger. The antecedents to that might be, hmm, when my kid acts a certain way, or when my wife looks at me a certain way, or uses a certain tone of voice, or when my boss talks to me a certain way, all of a sudden I start to have this physical sensation in my chest, right? Whether that be a tightness, whether that be a heaviness. I start to notice my breathing change. And then all of a sudden, I start to notice like these emotions come up. I start to feel frustration. I start to feel angry. And then I have these thoughts, these looping thoughts of like, oh, why does he talk to me like that? Or, oh, I can't believe the kids are doing this again. Or why does she talk to me like that? That's not fair. And a lot of times, again, all of this stuff is happening outside of our conscious awareness. So it might seem that we go from 0 to 100 when really there are a lot of precursors or antecedents or things that are going on within us before we actually get to the point of no return, right? Before the tea kettle gets to the point where the top pops, or the pressure cooker gets to a point where there's just so much inside of us that it has to come out. And again, usually um, with my clients, usually this stuff happens in a manner and in a way that they aren't too stoked about, right? It's in a way that's unhealthy. It's in a way that maybe causes harm to the people that they love. And so self-regulation is starting to develop the awareness of, oh my gosh, I'm feeling this way, and recognizing that there are certain patterns in your life and certain things that activate us into this reflex of unhealthy ways to express certain emotions. And then what we're able to do is we're able to build in a pause. And this is the most important thing. Once we're able to build in that pause and we're able to notice these things as they're happening in real time, what we're able to do is take a step back, maybe take a few deep breaths, maybe remove ourselves, take a break. If we're talking, like an example of like if we're getting into a heated debate with our wife, and we're noticing these antecedents and these precursors to what happens eventually, to where we get to the point where we say the things that we don't want to say, we raise our voice, etc. We can say, oh wow, I'm noticing that I'm feeling that way before this next big thing happens. And instead of turning into the Hulk, our whole body's turning green and us losing control, we can take a pause and we can say, hey, I think I need a 5-minute break here. Or, with our kids, we can do the same thing. We can ask our wife for help, or um, we can redirect our kids and then take a step back, take a few deep breaths, walk around the house 5 minutes, go outside, take a little walk. We can do some push-ups. You can do some jumping jacks. Really, any sort of movement is what is key, and breath work is key to releasing that energy that's pent up inside, to get us back to a place where we can calm ourselves down, be in control, and be able to express the things that we're feeling in a way that is healthy rather than unhealthy. And the important part about this is, the other half of this is just like really understanding biologically, physiologically what's going on when we experience dysregulation, right? Because what happens is when we do experience something that takes us out in a way, right? When things ramp up and we get to a certain state where we lose control, where we say things that we don't want to say, what's actually happening in your body is the smart part of your brain is shutting off. Okay. it's called the prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for all your executive functioning, your impulse control, your ability to delay gratification, again, your executive functioning, um, and your ability to decision make, to plan, all those good things, they begin to shut off because your body is experiencing overwhelm. Your is experiencing so much emotion that it's kicking you into a state of fight or flight. And when you do that, and when the prefrontal cortex does shut off, then all of a sudden you're stuck in your limbic system. And not to get too nerdy here, but your limbic system is responsible for fight or flight. It's more animalistic. It's older hardware. So you're operating at a lower capacity. So if you've ever thought to yourself, like, man, why did I do that? Why did I show up like that? Why did I say those things to the people that I love? It's because you don't have access to your most advanced hardware. You're literally operating from an animal part of your brain. So it would make sense if the things that you did were almost animal-like, right? Um, we know as mature adults that are regulated that whenever you yell at somebody, or whenever you raise your voice, or whenever you say things that are snarky or in contempt or critical, that doesn't move the conversation forward, especially with our wife, especially with our kids, especially with the people that we work with or our friends, etc. The only thing that gets people, to either hear your point of view or to calm things down is a calm, self-regulated and regulated nervous system, right? Have you ever had somebody that you're upset with that you come at and then they respond to you in a self-compassionate, uh, curious, loving, understanding way and in a nice, calm tone? It's like, what's your natural reaction when you come at somebody with anger and frustration, like, for example, the really good customer service people, what do? They hear you out. They understand your point of view. They validate your feelings as real. And then they ask, hey, I'm here. How can I help you? I don't know about you, but I notice when people do that, all of a sudden it feels like they take the sword and the axe, right? The pitchfork and the torch out of my hand. And it's like, oh, wow, okay, this person cares. This person wants to understand me. And then it calms them down. Well, the same thing is possible for you to implement with your wife and your kids. When you understand this stuff, you can understand why things are happening in real time. And instead of being reactive and having your emotions control you, well, you can notice and start to redirect and control your emotions. That is the power of self regulation. And I don't know about you, but I've spent a lot of years feeling like I was chasing my tail, right? Just trying to change my mindset, change my thoughts, to change my state, change my story so that I could show up differently in my life, right? Whether that be in how I show up with my wife, whether it be how I show up at work or with my kid. My mind, although it's a powerful thing, when you're able to actually regulate your body and be able to control that in a way, it is going to impact your mind and your thoughts. And when the two can communicate and connect with each other and work together, instead of you trying to convince yourself in your thoughts to change your body, with self regulation, you recruit your body and your mind so that they can basically get on the same team again and work towards a common goal, which for most people is to live a happy and joyful life, have a happy marriage, and be that example for your kids. And yeah, I think that's probably the biggest benefit to self regulation. How you self regulate is, again, start to build the awareness of what's going on internally. And what's difficult about this for most people is a lot of us, especially men, are kind of disconnected from our bodies, right? Those feelings that we have internally, body sensations, emotions, and not to shame yourself here, because for the most part, as a culture, as a society, men typically are not allowed to feel certain emotions or feelings. It's like, hey, suck it up, don't be a baby. So essentially, we don't have a lot of practice with this. And like, for example, if you're somebody that has, you know, tried meditation, let's say, is a good example, and a common thing that I hear is the response that I get is, oh, meditation just isn't for me. I have a monkey mind. It goes everywhere. And it's like, well, yeah, that would mean that you're normal and you're human. And the point of meditation isn't to just clear your thoughts, right? It's to better understand how you work and to be able to actually sit with what is. And a lot of us haven't been shown that by example. So, again, a really great way to start to develop the ability to self regulate is to be able to sit with your own emotions and just like start to notice what comes up. Because, again, the key to all this and the key to self regulation is to start to develop the awareness of what's going on internally. Because what happens is we have a stimuli, it triggers a reflex for us to react, and that reaction happens outside of our conscious awareness. So we don't know what's going on unless we are trained to pay attention, right? So we have the stimuli, the trigger, and then we have basically a built-in reflex of how, based on our life experiences, we react to certain things. So what we want to do is have the stimuli, notice the trigger, feel that within us, build in a pause, which gives us the ability to shift into a new behavior instead of just reacting. And this is so, so, so important. Go back and listen to this, hit rewind. I'll say it again. You have the stimuli, the antecedent, right? The thing that happens before. Then you are triggered by that, right? You have a reflex to that. And then instead of going into whatever your adaptive response is or whatever you normally do, what you want to do is notice that activation or that trigger. And you notice that by saying, oh man, there's the tightness in the chest. Oh, there's the feeling, there's the thought. Oh my gosh, I just noticed that I was activated or I was triggered by something. Once you have that awareness, you can pause, take a deep breath, you can go for a walk, and you can start to really understand what's going on and then choose something different instead of just having that reaction. You can make lasting change because the thing is the state that your nervous system is in, it becomes your personality trait, right? So if you respond a certain way, if you're always yelling, always angry, it's like, oh yeah, Jason, he's always angry and he's always yelling. He's like, but when you build awareness to that and you start to notice why that happens within you, you can actually make lasting change because the next time that happens, it's like, oh, there's that feeling. Oh, well, if I know what happens at the end of this path, I do this, and then I yell, right? So then you can build a pause in, take some deep breaths, go for a walk, maybe learn to express, your frustrations and your anger in a different way that's healthier. The best way to express that you're angry is just simply saying to the person that you're talking to, I'm angry right now. And that is, again, a learned thing over time. And eventually you go from the person that's the yeller or that gets upset into the person that's like, oh, has awareness to it and doesn't yell anymore. And over time, you shift from that identity and the belief that, hey, you're just a yeller and this is who I am, into somebody new. So hopefully you guys enjoyed that. This is definitely something that we get into in my one-on-one coaching. By the way, if you're interested in that, you can check me out on Instagram, Jason Schnitzer Coaching, or on my website, you can learn more, jasonschnitzercoaching.com. All this stuff is in the show notes. Feel free to check that out. And if you have any other questions, want to talk to me directly, feel free to DM me on Instagram. And yeah, guys, thanks for tuning in, and I'll catch you guys next week.